On June 20th, 1987, in the mountains of Ararat, Turkey officially recognized the discovery of Noah's Ark. Located on a mountainside about 15 miles south of the volcanic Mount Ararat, the remains of the massive ship were dedicated during a special ceremony. Guest of honor was Ron Wyatt, due to his 10 years of research at the site.
On the historic occasion of June 20th, 1987, the governor of RE has announced to the world that Turkish archaeological authorities agree with Ron's findings that the area under investigation is indeed the landing site of the legendary Ark. The governor, key military officials, local officials, and police have gathered in preparation for the ceremony.
The story began in 1957 during the Cold War, when aerial photos taken of eastern Turkey while searching for Soviet missile bases revealed a strange boat-shaped formation in the mountains about 6,300 feet above sea level.
All of us thought it was a boat.
Life magazine reported on the story after an expedition from the United States went to the site in 1960. Blowing holes in the strange formation, the members of the team came away with the conclusion that there was nothing there of any archaeological interest. Ron Wyatt, like many others, read the story, but he was of the opinion that the site needed further exploration. He noted the biblical account of the location of the Ark. And the Ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. Urartu, the biblical Ararat, was a large region in eastern Turkey. This location was certainly feasible.
Located approximately 15 miles south of Mount Ararat and is known locally as Doomsday Mountain. Dr. Arthur Brandenberger, a stereophotogrammetry expert. After studying the object and comparing the measurements to those in the aerial photos, he was quoted as saying, "I have no doubt at all that the object is a ship. In my entire career, I have never seen an object like this on a stereo photo."
17 years after the Life magazine article, Ron finally made the journey to Turkey. When he saw the boat-shaped object, he saw that it looked just like it did in 1960, and he knew he would need permission to excavate in order to learn anything about what was beneath the surface. So he returned home. In late 1978, he learned of an earthquake in eastern Turkey and returned in August of 1979. When he arrived, he was overwhelmed by what he saw.
Ron is not prepared for the sight he's seeing. The earthquake has dropped the earth from around the sides of the remains, and the formation is now completely exposed. There, at 6,300 feet above sea level, in the mountains of Ararat, lies what appears to be the hull of a massive, ancient, man-made ship. The sides of the object are now clearly exposed, and the outline of the hull of a ship is now evident and clearly visible. These two photos, post and pre-quake, give one an idea of the extent of nature's timely excavation job. The photo at left was taken in 1960 by the first party to examine the object. The photo at right was taken by Ron in 1979, shortly after the quake. It clearly shows the large quantities of earth which have been displaced from the sides of the object.
The earthquake had dropped the soil around the object, and a large crack extended the entire length. He could see what looked to him like the remains of decayed rib timbers along the now exposed sides. Also, he was able to measure the depth of the debris and measure the length. It was 515 feet, or exactly 300 Royal Egyptian cubits. He was now convinced.
Now that's a remarkable correspondence. It's not 500 cubits, it's not 150 cubits, it just happens to be 300 cubits long. And the biblical story just happens to record the length of the ark as 300 cubits long.
He also takes samples from around the object in order to compare the two for possible significant differences. Immediately upon Ron's return to the United States, he rushes the samples to Galbraith Labs of Knoxville, Tennessee for breakdown and analysis. The results are electrifying. Not only is there high carbon content, as in long decayed ancient wood, there are also traces of metal. Here are the first definite positive signs that the object is not just a natural phenomenon, but indeed may be man-made.
Dr. Baumgartner and Ron scanned the entire site with 3 different types of metal detectors. Placing rocks at each metal reading, they then attached tapes to show the lines. This exciting evidence also attracted the interest of ABC's 2020.
That's a strong reading. Well,
I'd save those frames right there.
okay. Keep walking. Do you want a measuring tape to measure these things, how far apart they are?
He found distinct metal lines down the entire length of the object, while no metal readings were obtained just outside of it.
And the results with all 3 different types of metal detectors were consistent, and they did indeed give a pattern as they laid out strips, which show you some of the patterns that they got. Now they also got crosswise patterns and in a lengthwise patterning, and this was first discovered with the metal detectors.
John, as a scientist, might I take the liberty here to ask you, do you really honestly believe that you have been on the remains of Noah's Ark?
I have no doubt in my mind. This has to be a man-made structure. It's full of metal. The metal has a regular pattern to it, and the size of the thing and the shape of the thing is such that it's almost certainly a large boat.
The finished shape, outlined by the ribbons, was that of a huge ship, the approximate length and width of Noah's Ark, as described in the Bible. With the width and the length known, the only remaining question was depth. By locating the depth of the hull, they could determine if the boat-shaped object had the cargo capacity described in the biblical ark. To resolve this final issue, Wyatt and Fassel brought geologist Tom Finner to Turkey with his company's heavy-duty subsurface radar equipment.
Subsurface interface radar is a new high-technology tool which allows examination of objects underground without preliminary digging or excavation. The principle is simple enough. Electromagnetic pulses, or short-wave-length electric energy bursts, are transmitted into the ground. Echoes from these pulses bounce back and are measured by a receiver. The echo time can be translated into readings which are graphically recorded on a continuous roll of paper, such as an electrocardiogram printout. Thus, objects beneath the surface of the ground level may be located and, to some degree, measured.
There's the longitudinal bulkheads. You ought to see them popping out, Ron.
Yeah, there they are.
Here. There's
Yeah.
another one. There's the keel line right there.
Yeah.
All right, the lines are there. The lines are there. This is the west bulkhead.
All right.
That was over there. And he walked easterly. Here we start getting the longitudinal bulkheads. Here, 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 here.
Okay.
Here. You see there how it shows up?
Right.
The initial scans were very impressive, showing internal structure consistent with bulkheads and rooms. But to be sure they were interpreting the data correctly, Ron took the scan printouts to Geophysical Survey Systems, the developer and manufacturer of the radar.
This data does not represent natural geology. It's a man-made structure. These reflections are occurring very periodic, too periodic to be random natural type interface.
Basically, the radar scans show the same thing that the metal detector scans did, only with more detail. They show there's a pattern. They show there's a pattern of linear lines, there's a pattern of cross lines, and there's a pattern of even distribution to these lines in both directions. Now, that's precisely what you would expect out of the remains of a ship-type object, because you would have a keel, you would have parallel lines, which would be keelsons, and you would have the transverse lines, which would be bulkheads and other reinforcing of the ship.
He finds 3 massive anchor-type stones, all approximately 8 feet high and weighing several tons each. All are similar in proportion and design and have 8 distinct crosses, which are carved in the stone in a pattern which Ron and other experts believe refer to the 8 survivors of the flood. The placing and alignment on the stones tell of their relationship to Noah and one another. This is called an iconographic representation.
The difference that becomes obvious immediately is the difference in size.
These giant pierced stones are similar to ancient anchor stones used in the Mediterranean for centuries and millennia. They qualify quite readily as fitting the picture of stone anchors as Ron originally identified them. Only in size or scale do these stones differ significantly from their considerably smaller Mediterranean counterparts. If the size of the stone anchors implies the size of the boat or ship on which they were used, how much more should it be true for these stone anchors weighing several tons to be, by this standard, ark-size stone anchors?
I've seen 3 of those stones in the field. 1 is in a village and 2 are out in the fields by the village. The first point that one can make in comparing with anchor stones, and we have many, many anchor stones to compare with. Anchor stones were the common way to anchor ships until iron came in about 1200 BC. Anchor stones are tall in one dimension. They are thin in another direction, and they have a hole at the top. Now, the other aspect of these stones is their iconography. Somebody has carved some signs into them, as you can see from this one right here. The large cross in the center would be Noah. The medium-sized cross to the right and below would represent Noah's wife. 3 of the crosses up one side, above the arm of the cross, the major cross, would represent Noah's sons. The other 3 crosses up the other side would represent the wives of Noah's sons. There's exactly 8 crosses. There are 8 people in the flood story, and these are engraved upon stones that look very much like anchor type of stones. These are Christian crosses, but they indicate that the people who put those crosses on these stones saw some type of connection between these particular stones and the idea of Noah and the ark and the 8 people that were in the ark according to the biblical record. Now, these stones are very unusual and irregular in that they are not near any normal natural body of water. It seems evident to me that somebody either wanted to depict something like an anchor stone or actually used an anchor stone in this area. And yet the nearest bodies of water are 75 miles to the southwest and 100 miles to the north. No normal, natural, reasonable explanation for why anchor stones would be used in this particular area.
As electrifying as these discoveries are for Ron, they're not the only reason for him to believe that this area is the possible landing place of the Ark. Villagers tell Ron that the village in which the standing anchor stone rests is known as the Village of Eight. Also, this majestic valley, located a few miles from the village, is known as the Valley or Region of the Eight. None of the inhabitants of this region know how these names came to be. They've been passed down from generation to generation. Again, he clearly finds reference to the 8 survivors of the flood.
There was no longer any doubt that this was the remains of something man-made. In late 1986, the Turks announced their decision. The ceremony was set for June 1987. During that ceremony, the governor asked Ron to demonstrate the radar on site for the journalists and military officials. When Ron showed them a readout that he said looked like an intact timber, the governor then instructed a soldier to dig right there. What emerged was this petrified section of fossilized hand-wrought timber. Sectioning showed it to be laminated wood, 5 layers of timber glued together with pitch, clearly visible oozing from the end. This fossilized specimen shows that rivets were used in its construction. Their analysis showed that they contained iron, titanium, and aluminum, among other things, very sophisticated alloys that would be resistant to water. More complete radar scans revealed a ship, although damaged and collapsed in places, of very intelligent, modern design with a ramp system at the door which led to each level.
This is the best estimate of what Noah's Ark looked like. And we've designed this so that we can take it apart and show you what the inside looked like. Now the deck portion of the boat shows up very clearly on the radar scans, and we have reproduced that here in the deck portion of the model. We're delighted with the results, and at this point in time, personally, I can look anybody in the eye and say that this boat-shaped formation in eastern Turkey is actually the remains of Noah's Ark.
What we really need now is excavation. But I would say that each one of these positive steps does point directly identifying this formation as containing remains of Noah's Ark, but the final proof of the pudding ultimately must come from excavation.
In 1990, Ron performed what he called a mini excavation, where he took shovels and bent the blades into a giant razor. He and his associates then shaved off a very thin layer from one section, smoothing it to show the color difference between the structure members and the matrix.
There's a theology in Genesis 6 to 9, the 3 chapters that cover the flood story, and I would say it reveals 2 sides of the character of God. It reveals the side of character of God as judge, and it reveals the side of the character of God as redeemer. It reveals his character as judge of the antediluvians for the nature of their civilization, yet his redemptive activity is shown in his graciousness and mercy extended to Noah and his family.
By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world, and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be.
Who are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Do these captivating regions hold the secrets to our earliest beginnings as a race? Is this indeed the cradle of all civilization? What do these discoveries mean? Are they clues to the final answers to the questions of the birth of the human race? And if not, what is this mysterious ship-shaped object located 6,300 feet above sea level in the mountains of Ararat? Ron thinks he knows some of the answers. He believes it is Noah's Ark.